this year's TEDxUNB conference. My name is Fariha Qayyum.
And I'm Doha Hassan. We are the co-chairs of TEDxUNB's 2022 event. Each year, TEDxUNB has the privilege of showcasing a series of insightful talks prepared and presented by a diverse array of community members, all of which encompass a theme. This year's theme is Complexity Made Simple.
Many of the problems that we face today are very nuanced, and they consist of several interconnected factors that make them appear daunting to those on the outside. With our conference theme, Complexity Made Simple, we have selected 4 knowledgeable speakers to present complex issues in a way that makes them approachable to virtually any audience, without undermining their inherent complexity or the importance of these issues.
We hope you are as excited as we are to hear what our speakers have to say. Today's event will also include several networking activities, which we hope you will join us for as well. See you then.
For our first talk this afternoon, we have a fellow undergraduate UNB student, Bhavya Malhotra. Bhavya is a third-year international student pursuing a double major in economics and English and a minor in theater and drama. Bhavya has had the privilege to be part of the UNB community since his first year. Through serving in several leadership roles as well as participating in various conferences, clubs, and societies, Bhavya is thankful for the interpersonal skills he has been able to develop at UNB. In his free time, Bhavya likes to travel, spend quality times with his friends, and write poetry. His talk, My Simplified Attempt to Ace Public Speaking, will tackle the universal fear of public speaking and the ways in which we can overcome this complexity in life. Without further ado, introducing Bhavya.
Within varying vicissitudes of veracity, vindication verifies this virility. This is no code by a pioneer, but my amusing attempt to complexify a rather simple sentence that reads, I am strong. Yet the beauty behind words is that they help us amplify the depth of emotions that we may not even know existed in the first place. To explore this beauty and vigor of simplifying complexity, I would like to say hello to everyone on this year's TEDxUNB. My name is Bhavya Pratap Malhotra, and I'm an international student at UNB pursuing a double major in economics and English and a minor in theater and drama. I have previously served as the president of the UNB Debate Club, the International Student Society, as well as the UNB Townhouse community. I've had the fortunate experience of being connected with TEDxUNB throughout my undergraduate student life. While serving as a speakers director back in 2020 or emceeing for the conference back in 2021, I could not have imagined to be a fellow speaker for this year's conference. It is with great fortune for me to have this chance to be a speaker at this year's TEDxUNB conference. Consequently, it is almost fitting that my TED Talk would circle around the fundamental core of TED Talks in itself, that is public speaking. Confining public speaking to just oration in front of an audience would not help us understand how it still intimidates almost all of us, including me. Glossophobia, termed as the fear of public speaking, is an extremely common phobia that affects almost 75% of the population. The National Institute of Mental Health has reported that this widespread phobia is due to the underlying fear of judgment and negative evaluation by others. Hence, this widespread fear has registered within everyone's mind to deem public speaking as one of the major complexities of life. Our minds intercept that people who are good at it have a unique set of skills or have the inherent potential to be good at public speaking. However, I see it is important to decode this complexity and make our attending delegates understand how public speaking can actually be a very simple to understand and yet extremely useful tool to possess in life. The reason I chose this as the topic for my TED Talk is that I have been on both the spectrums of this complexity. I remember the exact moments about how I used to be fearful about the thought of getting or going in front of people for delivering a speech or taking part in a debate, let alone acting in front of a theater full of strangers, of some my family members and friends. With my palms sweaty, knees weak, and arms heavy, I felt perplexed that on the surface, I do look calm and ready. But still, the fear was too heavy to take over my mind and emotions and made me feel as if I was not prepared. Tackling this perplexity, I felt I was letting myself down. Here, I was daydreaming about winning debate arguments, being confident about delivering each and every line perfectly for my speech, or even putting words to my emotions on stage. However, I felt my dreams were being hindered due to my inhibitions about public speaking. However, I was tired of being cast in this web of my own inhibitions and hindrances that made me step away from my passion. I could envision how this effect is not just limited to me, but in fact, everyone feels the same about it. Therefore, I set myself with a particular goal in mind to dismantle this perplexity and tackle each and every aspect. To my surprise, public speaking as a complexity discredited and dismantled itself from my mind through the methods that are blended from either research as well as some personal hacks that have helped me be confident within public speaking in itself. I believe that the attending delegates would be motivated to view public speaking through the lens of a valuable asset and not something that would continue to intimidate them. There are some methods that I have formulated and would like to share with you guys. Some of the methods that I would like to elaborate now within actual talk of my own are helping and are guidelines for people who can actually utilize them, as well as any of our attending students and delegates in today's conference within their actual lifestyle. These methods would help you delegates explore the true potential behind public speaking and how you can improve it to be a good speaker. These are: first, solid depth of the content. While improv is something everyone loves to witness, it certainly cannot always be the assisting factor while public speaking. It is important to dive in and make yourself familiar with the topic that you would be talking or speaking about. A fearful factor that everyone possesses is not knowing about the part of their speech if ever questioned by someone, or even a simple query may you set you off from your topics. Hence, a good preparation and knowledge about the topic will help amid that fear factor. Second is the importance of enunciation. A very useful tool that helps me remember parts of my speech and speak with clarity is enunciation and correct pronunciation of each and every word within my speech material. Correct pronunciation and enunciation of words become a very good warm-up exercise for your mouth to not fumble or misspeak during the flow of your speech. It helps maintain the flow of thought and showcases the confidence in front of your audience. Third, material engagement. Bill Clinton once quoted, "In order to speak, I witness my thoughts directed singularly towards one person and then to the whole audience." Here, irrespective of the size of your audience or listeners, it is important to prepare your material with the invigorating thought of engaging your audience's mind and emotions throughout your whole material. It is often easy to drift off or have your listeners lose interest between as while you deliver what you may believe is the best speech of your life. However, it is important to pay attention to what aspects do resonate and what aspects do not with your audience, and make an effort to make those points the strength of your speech. Making calculative decisions always goes a long way in regards to public speaking. Fourth is to practice. Reciting the old proverb, "Practice makes it perfect," might sound a bit cliched, but cliches are cliches for a reason, right? Practice simply does not mean to go in front of a mirror and say your speech while you're imagining your audience. It's a very old practice and adage that everyone tries to follow, but within the depth of what lies behind this practice is it means how you understand your tone, your pitch, the volume of your sound in front of the audience. Practicing public speaking helps you memorize the context of your speech material in the subconscious and makes you understand the correct moments to pause, engage eye contact with the audience, and then resume with your material. Fifth would be to listen. While listening might sound as quite a weird tip for public speaking, it certainly has significant metaphors attached to it. Listen here refers to having an open mind about constructive criticism. On this journey to improve, it is important to gather perspectives and use constructive criticism from your listeners. The comments and feedbacks might be shocking at first, yet if it helps you in any ways, your command over public speaking would go a long way. Sixth and final would be effective body language. I remember the time I saw Terminator, the movie, for the first time, and in that, Arnold's character was a futuristic robot who used to only deliver each and every line in the same tone and no emotions, like as I just delivered right in front of you. I always used to take that as a cue to remind myself how effective body language can actually turn the tone as well as the intent of your whole material towards your audience. I always take it as a cue to remind that effective body language helps you engage with your audience much better. The correct posture, appropriate eye contact from time to time, a charming smile always goes a long way, appropriate pauses within your speech, and the confidence within your own voice helps you be an unforgettable public speaker in the eyes of your audience. Now, a lot of people might think that as I'm telling these tips as well as tricks towards public speaking, how am I trying to break that complexity towards a rather simplistic notion in the life? Well, as in my talk, I tackled and tackled this universal topic on complexity of public speaking. This talk, as it was progressing, and as I provided you guys with the solutions towards all these methods that can help you remove intimidation from public speaking, which were solid depth of content, importance of enunciation, material engagement, practice, listen, and effective body language. Well, after providing these methods to you, I would ask you guys to notice one thing, that these actually, when put together, make the anagram simple. Hence, this ties well with the context of our theme for today.
Our second talk this afternoon will be delivered by UNB alumnus Dana El-Mughayyar. Throughout her undergrad years, unsure of what to pursue in the future, Dana focused her passion through contributing to scientific community in clinical research. Dana is fortunate to have been involved in clinical research for over 5 years now. She is the clinical trials lead at the Kennedy Spine Center in the Orthopaedic and Neurosurgery departments and research associate for the Department of Anesthesiology at Horizon Health Network. Dana is the research representative member of the Neurosciences Network, which is a provincial group focusing on updating and discussing neurosurgery case care standards. She sits on the Acute Spinal Cord Injury Accreditation team for Health Canada Accreditation 2022 at the St. John Regional Hospital. Accreditation Canada People-Centered Spinal Cord Injury Rehabilitation Program, and is now steering committee members of the Spinal Cord Injury Network of Atlantic Provinces. She has multiple peer-reviewed publications and has presented at a national and international scientific conferences. Her talk, Unlocking the Unknown, will aim to simplify her invigorating and nuanced research experiences and findings.
Welcome to my TEDxUNB talk. I'm very excited to be speaking to you today, and I hope you take something away from my talk. So now, without further ado, let's get started. Have you ever stumbled upon yourself? You weren't sure of what career option you wanted to do. You're sitting there in your undergraduate years, and you're trying to map out your life. Well, this happened to me, and let me tell you how stressful it was. I was sitting there Googling, what can I do with my biotech degree? Asking my friends, asking my colleagues, what can I do with my degree after I'm done? Do I have to go to more school in order for me to get a good job? And most of the people that were in my class were interested in doing medicine, nursing, going into pharmacy, but that wasn't necessarily my interest. I wasn't really driven to do that. And so I couldn't really pin down what I wanted to do. However, I knew that I liked healthcare and I wanted to be in the healthcare industry. One of the things that I found really challenging was that I didn't have much direction. I needed someone to guide me, to kind of give me options, tell me, what are my opportunities? What am I able to do? What am I not able to do? What certifications do I need? What are recruiters looking for? And so here I was planning away, trying to find a career option. And that's where I think I went wrong, is I wasn't really digging in to find what I was passionate about and what I'm good at and how I can utilize that. So one day I was sitting at the Promise Partnership where I worked for the summer, and this woman came in, who was my director now, and she told me about an opportunity at the hospital for volunteering. And I was intrigued, and I'm like, wow, this might be really interesting. However, I was working at the Promise Partnership in the summer, and I had 2 other jobs, and I was a full-time student. So I said, can I really juggle volunteering as well? But then I had this feeling, and I said, this is a door opening. This might be the chance for you to find what you want to do. So the time is now. And I just have to be able to time manage and be able to put sticky notes all over my face and know what I'm doing. And my agenda is my friend. When going in to explain further on what this entails, she told me that they're a research center. And here I was thinking, this might be mentally draining. And typically students will steer away from it because it can be. And I didn't realize the importance of research, which is the topic of my talk today, unlocking the unknown through research, because that's the key goal that we do through research. So I started to look into, why is research important? What can I do in research? Do I have to just stay in healthcare? What if I was interested in business? I was doing a minor in business. Could I do research in business? Can I make an impact there too? Little did I know that it's an imperative part of learning and developing yourself as a scholar. Research unlocks the unknown, and it lets you explore the world from a different perspective and gives you a deeper understanding of different and various topics. When I say various topics, I mean different industries that involve science and engineering and business, so supporting a country's economy, politics, agriculture, food and beverage, anything from computer software to aerospace. Of course, healthcare and pharmaceuticals. All of these have high research and development expenses because it's critical to the improvement of products or services or even knowledge. So if you're a business student, you can discover how to form plans or study your market once you're employed in the field. You can figure out your goals for what's coming ahead. Now, in areas like medicine, research helps you identify diseases or symptoms, or helps you reveal new treatments and how you can implement them. Hence, you are preparing for the real world by knowing more about the challenges that you're going to have to face, or we're going to have to face as a community. So many successful companies that produce consumer goods or mass items invest big in research and development, and it's important. But the other important point that I want to bring out is that you're not stuck in one subject, and that's what I think a lot of students miss out, is that if you start off with doing research in business, you can switch out to anything else. It doesn't just have to be that. There's so much potential. Now, in terms of why is it important? Research is a tool for building knowledge. It builds curiosity too. You can understand issues and increase public awareness. It will help you succeed in your business if you are looking to even begin your business or you are contributing to that. It allows us to disprove lies and support the truth. Also, my apologies here, it promotes confidence when you're writing or when you're reading or when you're speaking, even public speaking and sharing valuable information that you have learned. It also provides nourishment and exercise for the mind. Another really key point about research is that it introduces new ideas. So it's very possible, and in most cases, we all have our own ideas and we have our opinions about certain topics. And once you research upon it, you might get a different perspective or learn more about it. And there are more viewpoints. And so it encourages us to entertain new and fresh ideas and review your own perspective too. And in some cases, too, it might change your concept. Another thing that I believe is really important or why research is important is that you have a fact checking. You're discovering a research bias, what's fake and what's not. And with internet technology and social media, pseudo-journalism has become a concern. Understanding current issues is another major point. So a lot happens behind the scenes before medicine gets to you. And I think that's often something that most people are not aware of. And when I say behind the scenes, they're not really sure of what I'm referring to. But for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, there were headlines that made it, and behind it, scientific research was covered. While most of the headlines were designed to catch your attention, some were factual. And most of the studies that produce meaningful results are out there. But how are we able to figure out what's true and what's looking at a genuine health concern and what's just looking for a clickbait and you to go in and see what they're talking about or less conclusive? Field testing and peer reviews, that's how we know. So not everything that's out there is true. And in research, scientists deal to or undertake testing the reliability and the validity of the claims that are out there. So there's integrity and competence that depend on the quality of the knowledge that we're spreading around. So again, not everything that we come up with is accepted. There's a peer review process before everything gets published, which means that it's fact-checked. It's investigated for any biases, for any errors in the methodology that may have occurred, any statistical errors. So other people review it in the field before it's out there in the scientific community at large. And this is crucial to knowledge dissemination and education to the public. Now, I do want to briefly discuss some opportunities that some of you might find of interest. So I am currently the clinical trials lead at Canada East Spine Center, which is located at the St. John Regional Hospital, and it's for the orthopedic departments, or we serve the orthopedic departments in neurosurgery, primarily in spine. I also do work with the anesthesiology department and with the cardiac team. The opportunity that some of you might be interested in is we do have a volunteer mentorship program, which we do have limited seats for, but every quarter we hire new students or those who go on to medical school. We have open seats. So if you are interested, you can go onto our website. It's canadaeastspine.com, and you can email Jill Kearney. Her email will be on the website, and I will try to leave it in the Dropbox or the commentary below, so that you guys can reach out to Jill. And if you have any questions at all, or if you were interested in seeing what projects we work on, please check out our website. I know this TED Talk wasn't primarily looking at what our center does, but I wanted to resonate with some of the students and the experience that I went through, and hopefully this kind of give you a little bit of direction of how much you can do with research and how important it is, and how different minds always do contribute to make a great results. And I think collaboration is very important between different and various departments, because that's how we come up with great results. And again, that collaborative mindset and results that we would have. In conclusion, I'd like to say, regardless of the career path that you're following or your societal circle, there's always room for learning. No matter how many experiences we have, or again, who is in our social circle, there are always things that we don't know and we can expand on. Research unlocks that unknown, and it lets you explore the world from a different perspective and fuels a deeper understanding of various topics that you might be curious about and want to learn. So for all the undergrads, or for anybody out there that's unsure of what to do, hang in there, because you can do this, and I know you can, and I know that you can do this. It just takes time and effort to find what you're passionate about, so that you can contribute meaningfully and enjoy what you're doing, because that's really important. You want to be doing something that you enjoy and that you're happy about, something that gets you out of bed every morning and tells you, I'm going to make an impact today, and I know how, and I love what I do. Thank you so much for listening to me talk. And again, if you guys have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to me. My contact info is on our website at canadaespine.com. And I appreciate you guys so much, and hang in there. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for joining us and watching the first two speeches of the afternoon. We will now move to Zoom, where we have some fun networking activities planned for you. We have also created a Kahoot game to quiz you on the content from the talks delivered by Bhavya Pratap Malhotra and Dana El-Mughayyar. The winner of this game of Kahoot will receive a $50 gift card. Please join the Zoom meeting now by clicking on the appropriate link you have received in your delegate information email.
We now invite you to join us for a 30-minute screen break. Take this time to get a snack, a drink of water, make a coffee, whatever you like. We'll meet back here at 3 p.m. for the next 2 talks and activities. Welcome back from your screen break. We hope you have had a chance to relax and are now excited for our next two talks. This next talk is done by Dr. Deibel, a UNB professor. Virtually, all aspects of physiology and behavior are influenced by the circadian system. Dr. Deibel is interested in what happens to the brain and body when an individual's circadian rhythms are not in sync with their environment. Much of his focus has been on trying to understand the interplay between memory and circadian rhythms. Primarily why circadian disruption is harmful to declarative memory. His other interests lie in the contribution of circadian rhythm disruption to the etiology of various diseases. In his laboratory, he and his team both use qualitative and quantitative techniques to assess circadian rhythms in humans, including physiological variables such as hormone concentration and core body temperature. In his talk, Circadian Rhythm Disruption, a Flight of Modern Society, he will investigate the influence of circadian system on mood, aggression, cognition, sleep, brain activity, aging, and various diseases. Please welcome Dr. Deibel.
Hello, everybody. I first want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to talk today. My name is Scott Deibel, and I am assistant professor in the psychology department at UNB. So my talk is about circadian rhythm disruption and how it is very prevalent in society today. I think this is something that we've all probably heard about, but something that we could also learn more about. So I'll start off by talking about what are circadian rhythms, what does circadian rhythm disruption look like, what does it do, and should we worry about it? So circadian rhythms are 24-hour endogenously generated oscillations in physiology and behavior. The goal of circadian rhythms are to synchronize our internal physiology with that of the environment so that we're better able to take advantage of things in the environment. So we as humans, we are diurnal, and that means we are active when it is light out. Now, our bodies, our circadian rhythms, are organized in such a way that when it is light out, our physiology and behavior is primed to better take advantage of the environment. So examples of processes that are under circadian control are things like hormone secretion, so sex hormones, but also cortisol, the major stress hormone. We've all probably heard about melatonin. Melatonin is under circadian control. Things as well like also blood pressure, so cardiovascular functioning, things like bowel movements, urinary secretion, of course, the sleep-wake cycle, all things that are under circadian control. Learning and memory is under circadian control. So the main thing to take away here is that we have these circadian rhythms, and they literally are influencing virtually all systems in the brain and the body. Now, what happens when these circadian rhythms are not synchronized with the environment? So what happens when our brain, our body, it's saying that it's one time and the environment is saying that it's another time? So example might be the body is saying, it's time to go to sleep, yet that person's environment is telling them that they have to be awake. So that in its essence is circadian rhythm disruption. So obviously things like shift work, you're going to get that. But what we're learning about now is that there are other types of circadian rhythm disruption that are more common, not quite as severe, but more common. And these are things like social jet lag. So again, we're talking about society here, and our society is organized in like typically 9 to 5 most of the time. And due to our circadian biology, some people find it harder to adjust to this schedule. As a result, what you'll find is during the work week, they accumulate a sleep debt, and then on the weekend, they would sleep in much later, and you get this sort of chronic circadian misalignment. So on the weekends, you're sleeping in, Monday rolls around, you have to get up early again. As the week goes on, then you get more of a sleep debt. And that is shown in this figure right here. So these bars are representing sleep time, and you can see here we have a weekend, and we're getting this participant sleeping in much later on the weekends, and then having to adjust their behavior accordingly when the work week starts. So this is social jet lag. It's very, very common right now. And how common, you might ask? So if we go back to shift work, 25% of the workforce in industrialized countries are shift workers. So that's a lot, a quarter of the workforce. Yet, with this social jet lag, so this milder form of circadian rhythm disruption, in a sample of 65,000, so a very large sample, we had almost 90% of people experiencing a degree of social jet lag. So this is something that is very prevalent, but we still don't really know that much about it yet. So I was a part of a paper that was trying to compile a lot of different information about systems that might go awry under conditions of circadian rhythm disruption. So we started off with things like, first off, the most, I think, shocking correlation might be between mortality rate and degree of circadian rhythmicity. So one study showed that lifespan was increased with those that had better circadian rhythmicity. So things like learning and memory are affected. Alzheimer's disease has a heavy circadian component. Cardiovascular disease, so stroke, heart attack, TIA, also affected by circadian rhythm disruption. Diabetes, metabolic syndrome, so the liver, kidney, pancreas, all affected. Probably the most common area talked about is cancer and circadian rhythm disruption. In the US, they've labeled it a probable carcinogen. And there's a lot of data showing that circadian rhythm disruption influences systems that regulate cancer. So I was part of a couple studies, and we were able to demonstrate that circadian rhythm disruption upregulates some genes, cancer-promoting genes. So this is very interesting. The last one we have is uterus and gonads, so reproductive health. There have been some recent studies that have shown that pregnancy during conditions of circadian rhythm disruption has harmful effects on the offspring. So this is something that we need to consider as well. If you think about healthcare, a lot of healthcare workers are often going to be working shift work while pregnant. So I picked a couple examples of studies which have shown that circadian rhythm disruption affects different processes. So as we saw in that other slide, it affects virtually everything. However, there are some that are sort of more well known than others. This was a study in 2001 in Nature, so this is a very high impact paper, and they were looking at airline workers that were flying large differences, so they were going across time zones, and they found that airline workers had smaller hippocampi, and the hippocampus, whenever you hear the hippocampus, think memory. So it's the major brain area involved in memory, and they found in airline workers it was decreased in size. Participants performed worse on tasks that required the hippocampus, and stress hormone cortisol was increased. So they've got this nice story showing that stress is increased by transmeridian travel, and this is likely affecting the volume of the hippocampus, which is likely affecting hippocampal dependent memory. So this was a very big finding. Another example I've chosen is a paper that was simulating shift work in the lab, and they were interested in mood vulnerability. And what they actually found was that with shift work, simulated shift work, mood vulnerability was increased, and that means that those that already have a mental health issue, or those that might develop one, basically the chances are increased that you might have a mental health episode with circadian misalignment. So it's showing that not only does circadian rhythm disruption affect, things like memory, it also affects things like mood as well. So how does circadian rhythm disruption work? So we'll try to get to the nuts and bolts of that. So what happens in the brain and the body that causes circadian rhythm disruption to occur? So this is where we're kind of getting from a complex construct down to a very, very simple process. So this is one of my favorite things about circadian rhythms, and I think it's very unique. So when we're trying to understand the neurological and the biological bases of behavior, it's very difficult because you've got many different brain areas and hundreds and thousands of genes that are involved. Interesting thing about circadian rhythms is that it's one of the only processes where you can actually trace circadian behavior right to a single gene. So you can disrupt one gene and you will actually change circadian behavior. This is incredibly amazing in my eyes. Now, the way that circadian rhythms are generated this is really interesting, is you've got this negative feedback loop with a cohort of genes, about 6 to 10 genes, that are called clock genes. And the transcription and translation of these genes is exactly 24 hours. So this is how circadian rhythms are generated. And the way that it does it is really simple, just with this negative feedback loop. So you've got some genes that are in this so-called positive limb. They stimulate the expression of genes that are in this so-called negative limb. And then when that expression wanes, then the genes in the positive limb start to be expressed again and start to make new proteins. So this is just an example of circadian rhythms. You can really just break it down to a really easy negative feedback loop. Now this is an example of showing the more complex figure. So this is showing the actual circuit that you would have. And believe it or not, this is a more simpler one. You could actually have one double the size of this. But again, it's just showing that you've got a couple of positive players up here. There's another sort of loop as well that affects this one. And then you've got the negative players down here. But again, it's just a negative feedback loop. And this is how circadian rhythms are generated at the molecular level. Then that affects neuronal activity, and then that affects behavior. So now we're getting to circadian rhythm disruption. So if circadian rhythms are generated at the molecular level, so that's got to be everywhere, right? It's got to be all over the brain, all over the body, and that is true. We've got clocks everywhere, but we have one master clock, so the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN. And it is the master clock, and what it does is it either drives the other clocks, so makes them tick, or it maintains the time that these clocks give. So that is the important part. We've got all these clocks, and they're all telling different times, but the relationship between those times is maintained. When that relationship changes is when you run into trouble. So I'll give an example of, say, a liver clock. So in the liver, our liver is very good at anticipating our meals. So if we eat at about the same time every day, and then we don't eat one day, this liver clock is going to pick it up, and you are going to have a change in the time that it tells. That then means that its relationship with other clocks in the body and the brain is then different. And we think that that is where circadian rhythm disruption lies. So it's basically because you've got these clocks that come out of phase with each other. So sort of what we're thinking is if we can find out the properties of each one of these clocks, and by properties I mean, how much attention does it pay to the master clock? Is it able to dictate its own ticking? So we can try to label that, and then it opens up avenues for potentially changing the times that these clocks are giving. And you might be able to then, if a clock gets out of phase, you might be able to bring it back, and this might mitigate the negative symptoms that you would see. So this is what I'm just talking about. So we've got change in the phase of clocks is likely what is happening with circadian rhythm disruption. So this is what I was just mentioning. So this is in regards to memory. That's primarily my background has been learning in memory, with how circadian rhythms are involved in learning in memory. And in this paper, we're talking about sort of what I just described, but talking about how to label a clock as a specific type of oscillator. And this is a graph from that paper, and it looks very, or a figure, sorry, and it looks, I think, maybe a little confusing, but it's actually very simple. So we're trying to determine if a clock is a slave clock, and that means that whatever the SCN does, it does, or if that clock can tick on its own. And we feel like if you can find this out, like if you can find out, is the liver clock a slave or a local clock, or is the hippocampus a local or a slave clock? We think that by learning this information, you're then going to be able to manipulate its functioning. And we know this for quite a few clocks, but we don't know it for many brain clocks. I mean, it's much harder to conduct these experiments in the brain, obviously. So back to this figure. So slave right here is just showing that whatever the SCN does up here, this slave clock is going to do it. It might have a different phase till a different time, but the amount it's adjusted is going to be the same. A local clock, it says, the SCN is doing crazy stuff, I'm not going to do it. And it just ticks. So we feel that if you can figure this out, you might be able to understand circadian rhythm disruption a little better. Now, this is exactly what we have been trying to do with the hippocampus, is we've been trying to figure out what type of clock it is. And what we did was we subjected rats in the red here to a day length that their circadian system can't adapt to. And what this then means is that the time that its body clock and the SCN is telling is different from the time dictated from their environment. So their clocks might be saying, let's sleep, yet the environment is saying it's time to be active. So if you look at this red bar, so we've got basically tissue was taken over a 24-hour period from the hippocampus, and then we did full genomic sequencing. So we're looking primarily interested in the clock genes, also learning and memory genes. And what we found was that you can see that in the circadian rhythm disrupted animals, there was a bit of a shift in the phase of that clock, and also it was attenuated as well down here. This next figure is basically phase differences between our two groups for all these different genes down here. And this is a confusing graph, but all it means is that if these two dots are close together, there's no change. If these two dots are far apart, there's a big change in phase. And again, phase is just the ticking of the clock. So as you can tell by looking at this, you'll be able to say, is it a local clock or is it a slave clock? Well, maybe not definitively, but you'll get sort of an idea. So we're seeing here that in a lot of cases, there's little change between the clock genes. So to us, this is suggesting that it's likely a combination of slave and also autonomous, but we have to do some follow-up tests, of course. But what we're seeing here is changes in phase or not changes in phase, depending on the gene, under conditions of circadian rhythm disruption. So studies like this, and we're just at the beginning. I just wanted to put this in, but we've got a lot to do with this data set. But I think studies like these are really going to help us try to figure out what is going on. And when we figure this out, if it's a local or if it's a slave clock, then we might be able to try to mitigate it under conditions of circadian rhythm disruption. So the takeaways from this talk, if you could get a couple things, I think the main things would be that circadian rhythms influence everything. Circadian rhythm disruption is actually really prevalent in modern society because of a reliance on artificial light and things like this. And circadian rhythm disruption is harmful to a lot of different processes in the brain and the body. And we think that it could be due to a mismatch between the phases of different clocks in the brain and the body. If you're interested in this stuff and you're set on not studying it at UNB, of course, if you are, contact me and I'd be happy to talk to you about opportunities in my lab. But there's other great people as well in Canada that work on this stuff and past supervisors of mine. So Robert McDonald at the University of Lethbridge and Dr. Christina Thorpe at Memorial University. And acknowledgements, I'd just like to thank all the labs that have helped me out over the years and my funding, the funding I've had. So thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you guys at the conference.
Our final talk for the day will be delivered by another fellow UNB student, Rose He. Rose is a second-year electrical engineering student. She was first introduced to environmentalism when she chose the topic of fast fashion for a public speaking competition. Since then, Rose has been a passionate climate activist, founding the UNB Students for Sustainability Club, leading the UNB fossil fuel divestment movement, collaborating with the UNB SU to deliver an open letter advocating for alternative investing options, and organizing climate strikes with Fridays for Future Fredericton and the Conservation Council. When she isn't fiddling around with circuits or sustainability, she enjoys biking around Fredericton trails and supporting local restaurants. In her talk, Climate Change, Deciphering a Convoluted Future, Rose discusses the implications and nuances within the realm of climate change and its associated effects.
The alarm bells are deafening and the evidence is irrefutable. Greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuel burning and deforestation are choking our planet and putting billions of people at immediate risk. This is a code red for humanity. These are some of the words of UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres after the 2021 climate change report was published. There is currently no doubt that our climate is changing at an unprecedented rate, and such changes are bringing about heat waves, torrential rains, and devastating floods, destroying entire ecosystems and species. This is a local, national, and international problem. We see these impacts on our news headlines, with new heat records being broken year after year after year, and scientific reports outlining new points of no return that we seemingly keep on reaching. Our climate's future seems to be in limbo, and it can be incredibly difficult to navigate our lives in this era of information and uncertainty. So, how do we find hope and decipher our convoluted future? This is a challenge I myself faced as a young climate activist. I felt overwhelmed, feeling like I faced the mountain of climate change while being surrounded by non-stop noise. On one side, voices telling me that I was dramatic and that climate change was fake. And on the other side, alarm bells ringing, telling me that I needed to do everything and anything. I needed to be that perfect environmentalist and have zero carbon emissions. And in this situation, I felt torn and guilty. How can you, as one singular individual, tackle climate change? Throughout my years of being an environmentalist, I've simplified climate action into 3 steps. The first step is knowledge. Knowing the context of climate change and understanding what is true and what is false. The second step is hope. Understanding our individual limitations and recognizing our windows of opportunity. The final step is action. From that window of opportunity, taking that step forwards. By breaking climate action into these 3 steps, we can decipher our convoluted future and find our path forwards. Let's start off by looking at our first step, which is knowledge. This step is all about gaining awareness of climate change and having more or less a general understanding of where we currently stand. So as an example, let's briefly look at the facts that we have available. We know that climate change will result in instability in many realms, namely food, insecurity, housing, and global health. We know that with high confidence, human influence has warmed the climate at a rate that is unprecedented in at least the last 2,000 years. We also know that this global warming is currently estimated to be 1 degree Celsius, and we are trying to keep this global warming below 2 degrees Celsius, ideally 1.5, in order to mitigate devastating consequences. This is some of the foundational knowledge for understanding climate change. And from this knowledge, we can educate ourselves further. What are environmentalists doing in my community? What are they doing in your community? What are they doing nationally, internationally? What are some changes in the climate that you yourself may have noticed? A major challenge in this step is blocking out the noise. With so much information and disinformation available at our fingertips, it's key to decipher between what is true and what is false. Social media posts, hate comments, and ads can be created by anyone. Keeping up to date with news from climate scientists is a reliable method of getting trustworthy information. So, once we have a decent understanding of climate change, what do we do now? With every scientific report being released, each revealing more terrifying facts and points of no return that we keep reaching, it can be easy to sit back, throw your arms in the air and say, so what? In the act of understanding, we can fall into a rabbit hole of doomsday information, and the anxiousness of uncertainty can be paralyzing. The next step in climate action is finding hope. Understand that you are not alone in facing the mountain of climate change. Globally, scientists, innovators, engineers, environmentalists are working together to find solutions. Progress is being made. And recognize that there's a window of opportunity for action, and how large this window is varies for each of us. Some of us may have a smaller window of opportunity and less access to resources, and that is okay. Meanwhile, policymakers and major societal actors are individuals that have access to many resources and have larger windows of opportunity to lead environmental action. We cannot turn carbon emissions off like a switch on a light, but we can foster hope and recognize what each of us can do. This brings us to our last step, which is action. This comes from recognizing our window of opportunity and taking action where possible. For each of us, our actions may look different. Small adjustments we can make to our lives include reducing carbon emissions by deciding to walk or bike instead of driving, and following the classic R's of reducing, reusing, and recycling. Although these actions are small, they add up. Together, we can create a large impact. It's important to note that although these actions add up in the long run, they also have their limitations. and represent only a small portion of what we as individuals can do. You can, for example, join a local environmental group and help with existing projects. You can be an activist and demand for those individuals with larger windows of opportunity and access to resources and demand for climate action. At this point, you might be questioning what one person can actually do, and the truth is, one individual person standing up as a leader can create large waves of impact. In 2018, after 15-year-old Greta Thunberg sat in protest in front of the Swedish parliament, roughly 4 million activists gathered to protest the climate inaction from global leaders. In this case, an individual action resulted in an international movement. You can take opportunities when they arise, or you can step up as a leader and create them yourself. Both actions matter, and they are a testament to your perseverant character. Both actions are part of greater climate action. All in all, climate change can be scary, and it can be easy to feel lost. To help simplify things, climate action can be guided by three main steps: knowledge, educating yourself, finding hope and identifying our windows of opportunity, and finally taking that action. Looking at climate change, it might feel like you're one person staring up an insurmountable mountain with no end in sight. But by taking a step back, looking at the mountain and gathering our knowledge together, we can find hope, our window of opportunity, and take that decisive step forwards to our future. Although our future is uncertain, our actions are not. As individuals and as a society, we can conquer that mountain of climate change.
Thank you for joining us and watching the final speeches of the afternoon. We will now move to Zoom, where we will have the second round of networking activities planned for you. We have also created another Kahoot game to test you on the content from the talks delivered by Dr. Dybel and Rose Huh. The winner of this game of Kahoot will receive a $50 gift card. Please join the Zoom meeting now by clicking the appropriate link you received in your delegate information email.